you're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. The headlines this hour. Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah sign a unity deal in Beijing, but members of both groups tell I24 News the agreement is meaningless. UAE hosted a secret meeting of Israelis and Americans in Dubai last week to talk about potential solutions for Gaza. And Iraq pushes for the US to withdraw all of its troops by September of next year. This despite concerns that ISIS is resurgent. First, a Chinese brokered deal between Fatah and Hamas is meaningless, according to sources in the Palestinian factions who spoke separately to I24 News. The two signed an agreement in Beijing today aimed at ending years of bitter division. But a number of similar reconciliation deals have all failed in the past. Israel's foreign minister said the deal was proof that the Palestinian Authority embraces terror. Robert Swift has the story.
Following 3 days of talks, 14 Palestinian factions signed a document, ostensibly moving them closer to a unified front. China's Foreign Affairs Ministry hosted the negotiations.
Well, as China looks to make its mark on post-war Gaza, there are reports of a secret meeting that took place in Dubai on the same issue a week ago. According to Axios, the UAE's Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed hosted Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and White House Special Envoy Brett McGurk. And a day before that meeting, the Emirati envoy to the United Nations, Lana Nuseibeh, has spoke to the Financial Times. She said the UAE would be willing to take part in a temporary force to help run Gaza. Well, to talk more about that, still with me in the studio, Professor Uzi Rabi, and we're also joined on the line by independent commentator and writer, Dr. Nasir Al-Amari. Thank you very much for being with us, Nasir. Good to see you. So it seems that the UAE is willing to step up and take a role in managing Gaza. This would come with enormous risks, though, wouldn't it? What is the upside for Abu Dhabi?
Well, thank you for having me. Abu Dhabi doesn't like what's happening in Gaza. They think it's destructive to the Palestinians, and they believe that the U.S. and Israel can move in a different direction. However, they're also weary that Hamas coming out of this unscathed or coming out as a political entity.
Well, meanwhile, an Israeli drone strike killed 2 senior terror operatives in the West Bank today. Emma Siegel has this report.
Scenes of destruction following an Israeli drone strike in the West Bank city of Tulkarem. The strike targeted 2 senior terror operatives, Ashraf Nafeh, the head of Hamas in Tulkarem, and Mohammed Abu Abdo, the head of Fatah-linked Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades in the same city. The IDF says that Nafeh was responsible for preparing and planting explosive devices to be detonated against Israeli troops, as well as being involved in recruiting Hamas operatives. While Abu Abdo was involved in shooting attacks and raising money for the terror activities in Tulkarem, the joint counter-terror operation carried out by the IDF, Shin Bet, and Israeli border police used a ruse to draw the terrorists to an open area where they could be targeted by the strike. Violence erupted on the streets of Tulkarem during the raid. Palestinian media reports that 5 were killed in the clashes.
Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Washington, D.C., where he's been meeting with some of the families of the hostages still being held in Gaza. Netanyahu said a deal to free them could be near. Our Sarah Martinez has the story.
It was supposed to be the speech where Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu makes his case to the American public, an unprecedented 4th address to Congress by a foreign leader to convince a bipartisan audience to continue its support of Israel at a time when the war in Gaza has caused growing backlash from the left. The premier insisted on flying to Washington despite anger from the hostage families that now is not the time.
Yemen's Houthis have shrugged off Israel's first ever direct strike on the country, retaliation for a deadly drone attack on Tel Aviv last week. The Israeli Air Force destroyed Yemen's port of Hodeidah, but the Iranian-backed group says it will not be deterred from launching further attacks on Israel. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has this report.
Yemen's Hodeidah port continues to burn 72 hours after Israel's retaliatory strike on Houthi-controlled sites, and the Iranian-backed terror group is vowing to expand their strikes against Israel.
Israel's aggression will not benefit it at all. It will not provide it with deterrence, nor will it prevent the operations carried out by the Houthi army in support of the Palestinian people, nor will it prevent us from continuing the fifth stage of escalation against the Israeli enemy.
This so-called fifth stage of the Houthis' operation will reportedly include surprise strikes on areas that have not yet been targeted. The Lebanese Al Akhbar newspaper, which is affiliated with Hezbollah, claims the Houthis are planning to target Israel's offshore gas fields and energy sites.
And amid the threats from Iran's proxies in Yemen and also in Iraq, we're moving now to northern Israel, where its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah continues to fire missiles into Israel's northern communities. Our Balich Sledim is up in northern Israel with the latest for us now. Balich, what's happening?
Yes, half an hour ago, the sirens went off in Kiryat Shmona for the second time in the past hour. About 10 rockets were fired from south of Lebanon toward that Israeli town. Also, earlier in the day, we've heard the sirens there. The target was Bet Hillel. Actually, none of the attacks has caused any casualties from what we understand, but damage was caused, and fire also broke in some areas, specifically in the western Galilee, when 4 drones were fired from south of Lebanon. Some of them were intercepted by the Israeli air defense forces, but others landed in open areas and caused fire there. Hezbollah took responsibility 6 times until now for their attacks. This is coming after 2 assassinations targeting Hezbollah militants in the south of Lebanon, one in Shakra, the other one in other town in that area. According to the reports from there,
Well, Iran has seized an oil tanker that was destined for the UAE. The Togo-flagged ship was intercepted carrying 1,500 tons of marine gas. That's according to the British security firm Ambre. The vessel had loaded marine gas off the coast of Iraq and was on its way to the UAE's Sharjah port. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Norman Rule. He's a veteran of the CIA's managing programs on Iran and the Middle East, and is now a senior advisor at the group United Against a Nuclear Iran. Good to see you again, Norman. Thank you for joining us. Is this the first time Iran has directly targeted an Emirati ship, and what might be the consequences of that?
Good evening to you and to your viewers. This is not the first time that Iran has seized a small smuggling vessel. Many of these vessels do end up at refineries in the Emirates. This is not a political action or a military action. We're unlikely to see any significant escalation of tensions between the Emirates and Iran because of this issue. However, it does underscore that Iran does seize ships in the Gulf and will continue to do so. And this will, of course, cause complications for Gulf actors as they think about their defense of their own shipping. Well, regarding Iran and its proxies, we should look at Sudan and East Africa as an area where Iran, the Houthis, and Palestinian militants will certainly aim to build an area of operational activity. And it's imperative that we do something about Iran's relationship with the Sudanese government, to which it supplies drones, as well as preventing Iran and its proxies from building that presence, because that would provide an arms shipment machine for Iran, not only against the Arabian Gulf, but Israel itself. Regarding Russia and Iran in terms of their navies, this is fairly low-level engagement. These are not impressive navies. Their operations involve target firing, some search and rescue. It's highly symbolic, but they have different doctrines, different operational goals. This is more of a political gesture than an actual increase of military capability.
Norman Rule, thank you very much indeed. Great to talk to you. Well, to the UAE now, which continues its long-standing policy of cracking down on groups linked to the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Last week, the UAE jailed 43 people to life in prison for conspiring to commit terrorist attacks. And a student who was in the country on a student visa was deported after he used his graduation ceremony to yell "Free Palestine" while wearing a keffiyeh. Students had been previously warned against doing that.